Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janice, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today is Wednesday, July the 6th. I hope I have my dates correct. Oh my gosh, I'm so date and time zone challenged these past couple of weeks. But anyways, welcome so much today to Stories That Inspire Us. Today, I have on an amazing guest. I am so excited to introduce to the Stories family, Paige Park. Welcome to the Stories podcast family.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with the Stories family and with you.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, Paige, as we often go through life happens, right? And my gosh, and we've all been through so much these past couple of years, but you are the owner of Tulsi Rose Yoga. And what I love about what you do is that you connect yoga, movement, breath work, and meditation to assist your clients and the people that come to your classes with grief. I have so many questions, but the first question, obviously, that I want to ask you is, how did you get started and how did that type of work come about for you?
If you had told me 2 years ago that I would A, be teaching yoga and B, be teaching grief yoga, I'd have told you were crazy. It's kind of two stories that diverged. Let's start with my yoga story. I took my first yoga class in college as a PE credit, which was kind of fun. And since that point in my life, yoga weaved its way in and out of my life until about 4 or 5 years ago. The school corporation that I work for offered some yoga classes at a discount, and I really connected with the teacher and had lots of conversations with her. And one of the things that I was exploring at the time was how to help support my students a little bit better. A lot of the kids that I worked with in school had lots of trauma, lots of mental health issues, regularly would report suicide attempts. It's been quite a dramatic experience. And so I like, as a teacher, how can I add tools to my toolbox and support these kids? And one of the things that I kept coming back to was yoga and meditation. And so through conversations and encouragement of her and research that I'd done, I decided to take a 200-hour yoga teacher training that was I was supposed to go to Costa Rica in July of 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. My teacher ended up stranded in the United States. The studio that I was going to, she was going to do a 200-hour training, but ended up moving it. And I'm actually glad I didn't sign up for it because I think, ended up canceling it altogether because it would have been that fall of 2020. So I found another teacher, was going to go to Costa Rica July of 2020 and do her 200-hour. She got stranded in the United States. Is actually from Indianapolis, where I'm from, ended up back in Indy, switched her programming to an online model for 2 years. Now she's got a blend of online and in person. And I did a 200-hour, loved it so much, loved her training so much, loved her so much. I ended up doing a 300-hour and 2 additional trainings after that. So I did a yin yoga and a children's yoga. So that's my yoga journey. So 9 years ago, my divorce was final. 5 months after that, my mother was diagnosed with a glioblastoma multiforme, which is a brain tumor where the fingers of the tumor reach into the brain tissue. From the date of her resection surgery to the date of her death was 9 months. And my brothers and I spent a pretty turmoil. There was a lot of turmoil in that time period. My brother calls it a storm. He uses an expletive before it. And it was, she was in and out of the hospital. She was in and out of rehabilitation places. She ended up in a nursing home, full on services, where she passed away. So it was 9 months later. in the meantime of all of this, my father, when he retired from his job a few years prior, was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Mom was his caregiver. And so we ended up having to also care for dad in this process. He fell and broke multiple ribs while mom was in the hospital. And it was, there's a lot that happened in a 3-year time span. 2 years after my mom passed away, my father passed away. And then unbeknownst to my other brother and I, my oldest brother passed away 2 years later. So in a 7-year time span, I got divorced, lost my mom, lost my dad, lost a brother.
Oh my goodness.
Yoga actually helped me. So in the middle of this and dealing with some of this is when I started back into my yoga journey. And I had been lifting and doing some other exercises prior to that. And yoga had always been like in and out a part of my life. And one of the things that I noticed is that as I was going through this grief process and I was going back into yoga, I was really starting to get in touch with my inner self, my feelings, my emotions. And when I started teaching yoga, that's what I wanted to teach people, is how to get back in touch with yourself, how to reconnect with yourself, how to reconnect with your emotions. And then a friend of mine suggested, hey, Paige, you should teach grief yoga, because she had had several traumatic grief events happen in her family, lost a couple of cousins due to overdose, a couple due to accident, and young people. And she's like, I'm seeing this need. I see this need in the world. Paige, you need to do it. So I did. My immediate reaction was, oh my gosh, no, I can't do that. And I have learned over the last several years that my first response is, no, that I need to lean into it and see what's there. And so I've been teaching grief yoga ever since. And it's a beautiful thing.
I got the chills when you said that, because, perhaps you were on that edge of fear when.
Oh, very much so.
And then you're like, but it came to you because yoga was your foundation. It grounded you. You saw the potential on its benefits, not to just yourself, but to really niche down in such a way that honored your journey with what you had been through. And as you said, within a very short period of time, a divorce, your mom and dad passed away within a very short time of each other. And then your brother, that's a lot of shit in a very short amount of time.
It's a whole lot. And I stuffed my feelings when my mom passed away, because we were dealing with my dad. He at that point had fallen the February before my mom died in July 10th, we're almost on her anniversary of her death. And we're actually almost to my dad's birthday is 2 days after my mom passed away. So my dad's birthday is July 12th. So we're almost there too. But that February, my dad had fallen off the porch because he was stubborn. He didn't use his walker like he was supposed to. And he tore something in his arm. And they'd gone in and repaired it with a staple. Well, it took months of him in and out of rehab, getting all sorts of intravenous antibiotic treatments to deal with the infection. And then finally they had the surgeon go back in and open him up. And it turned out that the staple that they had used to repair the tendon, his body was basically rejecting, and it's what caused the infection. So as soon as they removed the staple, the infection went away. And months we spent, he was dealing with this prior to my mom's death and after my mom's death. So he had gotten the repair, I think, done in May. My mom passed away in July. And then I feel like August, September, we were still dealing with all of this until they finally went in. And so we were thrown into all of these things that we had to just deal with. And so a lot of the grief was stuffed down. And I've noticed doing yoga, doing the trainings, and even teaching, like sometimes things will still pop up. It's like, oh, you're still there. Okay, let's deal with you now. Let's feel you. Let's let this go.
Wow.
It's been a journey for me as well, because there were things that I didn't know that were still stored in my body that I had just went, whoop, nope, we're not dealing with that right now.
I imagine it would be, because I think I shared with you with my son's journey this past year, and July 19th will be a year. I feel that that I call it an anxious tendency. Like it's just like this feeling of and but in relationship to what you are going through. So obviously yoga, like I said, always the foundation for you. You
Mhm.
have all this stuff going on. When did you find time to actually do the yoga? Like, did you just say, okay, regardless of what's going on at this date and time is just for me? Like, how
I,
did you get
I
that in?
I threw myself actually into CrossFit when my mom was sick. Yeah, I know, a little ridiculous. But it at that time, it saved my life because it was an hour out of my day where I thought about nothing but what I was doing next. Probably wasn't great for my adrenaline, a variety of other things, but for me at that time, for my mental health, it gave me just an escape, which is what I needed. So I did that while going through stuff with my mom. When my mom passed away, in fact, I remember the morning my mom died, I was at the gym. I'd done a workout and they called me and said, today's the day. And so I hung out for a little bit, and then I went in and went to the nursing home, and she died that evening. And then, so at this point, I hadn't started practicing yoga yet again at that point. Some things happened. That gym didn't close, but I ended up going somewhere else. That didn't really work out. It wasn't a home. I found another place where I powerlifted for 3 years. And while I was powerlifting, she had a yoga teacher that would come in and do yoga with us. And I found yoga to be a really good way to help prepare for the lifts that I was doing when I was powerlifting. And it wasn't until after my brother died, even. I think it was like right in the area, it was after my brother died is when I got back into yoga full-time and regularly. So I had experienced all of these things, and then I came back to yoga full-time.
Gotcha. Now I have a better understanding of
Yeah.
right.
The
And
timelines are a little interesting.
I think also interesting, I think when we go through these very traumatic events, CrossFit for you at that moment in time, in that time segment, that was one thing that you could control. So
Yeah.
I definitely see where you would throw your energy into that. As you said, where you thought about nothing for an hour, but what you were doing, you were concentrating on your class. So
And
now, go ahead.
no, you finish. I'll hang on to it.
So now, you get yourself in that realm where, okay, from 1 to 2 p.m., where it is, whatever the time was that you went to CrossFit, that was Paige's time. Like
Oh yeah.
that was nobody else's time.
And I needed that during that time period. In fact, yoga, sometimes you have to be able to sit with yourself. And I don't think I could have actually done that during that time period. I needed to forget about my life for a little bit because it was so stressful, because it was all consuming, because all I did was get up, go to work, go see my mom and dad, and then go home. And so that break in that to just go get in a workout and go be physically active for that brief 1 hour, hour and a half, depending on how long it took me to get through the workout that day, was a blessing for me. It was, again, like it was what I needed at that time in my life.
And sometimes that's exactly what the blessing is. It, even in the midst of all that was going on. You saw the value, you saw how you benefited, how that made you feel, because I can imagine, I've been there, you know, you walk into your class, for me, a kickboxing class, now I kickbox from home, and you're all like, this is my time. And then you leave there, and it's such an amazing feeling that, wow, I did this for myself, and you did that for yourself, which
Absolutely.
I'm sure benefited everybody around you, right?
It did. Oh, yes.
Mm.
I have occasions where I can be a little quick tempered, and that helped tame the quick temperedness. So, yeah.
And, you know, and you're saying that and kind of being jovial about it at the same time, and laughing with yourself, not at yourself, I will add.
Right. Yes, very much so.
And that's very important, people. Okay, that is very important, because those stressful times are really, I say, what makes us or breaks us. And
Mhm.
again, you know, I refer to my son's incident, and I look back on what transpired, like that really was a shitty ass time. I'm just going to be very frank about it. But I also look back on it, on the blessings, like everything that happened as a result of everything that had happened, if that makes any sense.
It does.
So,
Yeah.
so overwhelming. Like, you, in that moment of time, when my son had his accident, for me, like and we don't know what we don't know at that time, right? Because I didn't
Oh,
know
absolutely.
that moment of time that he had the accident. But I was feeling like I was on top of the world. And I didn't find it. His accident occurred at 1 p.m. on Monday, July 19th. I didn't find out until 2 p.m. 2 a.m. the next day. So I look back and I think, oh my God, there were so many blessings in disguise. You know, I couldn't see them at the time. But for me, taking care of myself was also a big thing, because I knew that I had to be strong for my son. And sometimes it's so hard in the midst of what you're going through to take care of yourself. So I applaud you for that, I mean, really taking care of yourself. That's so important.
It is. And there were, I mean, it was, yes, it was a difficult time, but there were also blessings. I spent so much time with my parents those last 3 years that was priceless. I mean, even though half the time you'd have the same conversation with my mom every 10 minutes, her short-term memory was absolutely nothing around, especially around the time she died. Long-term memory was fine. I'm so grateful for that, other than a weird incident when she had her surgery, which was a little humorous. I can share if you would like.
Sure.
So my brothers and I took turns staying at the hospital with my mom. And as a teacher at the time, her surgery was the Friday of our fall break. And so I was off for the next week. And I told my brothers, I was like, I'm off. I don't have to go to work. So I will, or maybe it was Thursday. I think it was a Thursday. So I was like, I can stay tonight if you guys need to go to work tomorrow. I'm happy to spend the night at the hospital with mom. And so they had her on steroids prior to the surgery, which made her paranoid. So the day before, she had called my brother, the middle one, there's 3 of us, the middle one, and was just there after me. This is happening, that's happening. I need you here now. And so he had gone to the hospital pretty early in the morning before her surgery. And my mother had the greatest sense of humor. If you've ever seen the movie The Brain with Steve Martin, it's a very old movie. He has like there's screws on the head, and they like unscrew the head and like flip it open. She kept referencing that. She was talking about her surgery.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, hysterical lady, great sense of humor. So I'm spending the night with her in the hospital. She's waking up quite often, delirious most of the time. She tried to fight my dad when she was coming out of the anesthesia, which is really unusual. and the nurses. She wasn't prone to violence unless you were coming after her children, and then Mama Bear kicked in, like most mothers.
Sure.
So she's in the hospital and she wakes up and she kept going, Nancy, is that you? Is that you? I'm like, what Nancy is she talking about? She had a cousin, Nancy. And then my dad has, or on my dad's side of the family, I have a second cousin, Nancy. I don't know what Nancy she was talking about. And I think she had a friend, Nancy, too. I have no idea what Nancy she was saying. No, Mom, it's Paige. Who? Reed? Is Reed here? I want Reed. Reed's the brother right ahead of me. Where's Ross? Can Ross? Never once did she say my name. I thought, oh my gosh, what did these people do to my mother? She doesn't remember me. Every time she woke up until about 5 a.m., it was the same thing. And then she'd go, this wasn't like my carpal tunnel surgery. This is some serious shit. Which,
oh my God.
Apparently got around the hospital because she was in the hospital, that same hospital, several months later. One of the nurses had heard that story.
Oh my gosh.
So even delirious, she had a sense of humor. And finally, about 5 a.m., she woke up and it was like, Paige, is that you? Was, yeah, Mom, it's me. I was like, oh, thank goodness she remembers me. But I did for a while there. I thought, what did they do to my mother? She doesn't, like, is she ever going to remember who I am again? She remembered the boys. She remembered my dad. Didn't. And every time it was, no, Mom, it's Paige. Who's that? Who's Paige?
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, you know what? And here's the amazing thing. When you were talking about that, like your face lit up and you were laughing.
Yeah.
And I just have a feeling that she would want that for you.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, she had a great sense of humor and we would joke about it later. I told her, like, when she was a little more with it, we told her this story and she's so sweet. She apologized for not remembering me. And so we got a giggle out of it later. It was a little frightening at the time.
Well, sure.
I was terrified that they had done, like, completely changed my mom. But even the day she passed away, she knew who each of us were.
Oh,
it was such a blessing. And she was quite out of it and quite delirious. She had a moment of clarity where she was able to talk to us the day that she died. But it was,
Wow. So now your heart is obviously broken. You go through time. And as you said, shortly after that, your dad, and then your brother.
Yeah.
Now that leads you to grief yoga. Now, was that the phrase that your friend came up with?
Yeah.
Okay.
She said, Paige, you need to teach grief yoga. And that's exactly how she worded it.
And how long did it take you? Like, your friend says that to you and you're thinking about it. Oh, I should do grief yoga. Okay.
A month later, I launched my first class.
A month later. Wow. And obviously you did it online, correct?
Online, in person. I have a small studio in my house as well, but I do both. So I teach online and in person.
Wow.
I actually launched I launched in person first, and then I added the online later.
Okay. What was that like for you? Like the first class when you were presenting, there must have been so much feeling inside of you. Like,
oh my gosh, there was so much feeling. I was honored that these three beautiful souls decided to trust me. There was so much gratitude and so much honor that they chose to come and share with me and go on this journey, because it's been a journey, and go on this journey with me. It started as, I'm going to do this for 6 weeks and I want a 6-week commitment from you.
mm-hmm.
And then the more I got into it and the more I worked with these beautiful souls, the more I was like, no, this just needs to be a regular class and I need to expand it to online. And so now it's a regular class at my studio, is a regular online class. And one of the special things about how, in the way that I teach, you don't have to have any prior experience with yoga. In fact, you are my ideal client if you don't have any prior experience with yoga. So if it's something that has interested you, if it's something that you feel like you could benefit from, which when I started teaching, this is the direction that I wanted to go anyway. This is really where I felt called. The people I felt called to work with were those who probably wouldn't set foot in a traditional studio, but felt that there was something there for them, felt that were kind of intimidated maybe by traditional studios in the West. And those, and all three of them never done yoga before.
Wow. So now you're doing, as you said, online, but in person.
Yes.
Does someone who take your class have to be going through grief?
No.
Okay.
No. I talk about active and passive grief. So I kind of have passive grief in my life now. It stays dormant because once you go through that event, it's with you. It doesn't go away.
Right. Right.
But it kind of goes to the back. And then every once in a while, something will trigger that. Like 2 years ago, I moved into my house. I was going through pictures. I was pulling pictures out of picture frames because I wanted to get rid of a bunch of them. And I pulled a picture of my brothers and I out, and behind it was a picture of my dad and one of his dear friends sitting on the front porch of their cabin in Wisconsin, which we would go to. It wasn't a regular trip, but we did it a few times as a family. And I immediately started sobbing. So that, it had been at that time 4 years since my dad had passed away. So it had been a little bit of time. It just immediately started sobbing. And then that lasted about a minute. And I've learned with grief, you just got to feel it. You've got to let it pass through you, wash over you. Don't identify it. Don't, just let it be. Just experience it. And the more you just let it be and experience it and don't give it a story, the quicker it will pass through. So I allowed it to pass through, just allowed to be with it, sat with it for a little bit. About a minute and a half, 2 minutes later, maybe even not that long, probably about that, I was cackling. I was laughing my head off because and this is a grief response too. Like laughter is also a part of grief because it was triggered a memory of conversations that the two of them would have.
I was really not just hearing you, but I was taking it in and listening to what you were saying. And it is true that grief never leaves you. And, we're coming up on 2 years in September since my dad passed. And, I'm reminded of so many different memories. And again, I think back on that time, we always wish we had more time, but I'm so blessed and grateful for the time that my husband and I had with him, because he lived with us for 2 years before he passed. But it still stings. And I think, as you said, you take it in and, let it sweep through you, because I think when you don't process your emotions and you stuff them down, that's when we really can be very vulnerable to so much more that's going around. And why not? Okay, here's this grief. Let's acknowledge it. Let's wash it through us. Let it do what it needs to do. But also look at the blessings and then laugh.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and one of those things, if you stuff grief down, it's gonna come back up. And it's probably going to be worse and more demanding, because grief has this way of demanding to be heard. Like it's a very insistent, and I know I'm talking about it kind of like a person, but it is kind of like an entity. It demands to be heard. It demands to be seen. And as a society, we don't always give into grief. We say things like, oh, it's been 6 months. Aren't you over that yet? Well, no, because it's with me the rest of my life.
Exactly. And I was saying to, I think one of my siblings a couple weeks ago, people, loved ones, friends that were staples in our lives were always there. And now they're not.
Yeah.
And you always think of that in terms of what here today, going tomorrow, like that. It's kind of odd, but we know it's a part of life. Like we know these things, but we're human beings and we have these feelings. And it's so important to process them in a way that we feel good about how we process. Now, when my dad passed, I kind of don't remember this, but when they were taking him away and the car was driving out, she said, I kind of collapsed to my knees. Now, I kind of don't remember that. I remember being lifted up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back to that moment, and I know that my dad would want me to lift myself up, be happy. Okay, acknowledge what's going on. Yes, this is sad, but I need you to be strong because you still have to live your life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what better way to do that?
Well, and you don't have to, you could choose not to, but
True.
truly live your life.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and I had a lot of conversations around that and around living fully and doing the things that you've said you always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And we both started doing that after our parents passed away. We both started taking trips, going places that we've always wanted to go, doing the things that we've always wanted to do. One of the things I promised myself after my mom died, every year I would do one new thing, whether it would be to go to a place I'd never been, have an experience I'd never had before, like do at least, now I've done more than one new thing a year, even during the lockdown. And in COVID years, I still was able to do some things that I've never done before. And to the point where I have 5 states left to go to, and I will hit all 50 states in the United States.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. What are the 5 that you have not been to?
New Mexico, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Maine.
Wow. So kind of somewhat in the area that I'm in, of course.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think, like if you had, where would you go first? Off the top of your head.
Off the top of my head, we're at Bali.
I hear Bali is so beautiful.
Yeah. Bali is high on my list. Iceland is high on my list. I want to see the Northern Lights. And then Ireland, Scotland, England, Ireland, Scotland is high on my list. And then the 5 places in the United States are high on my list.
Wow, that's amazing. I need to have you back on again. Like we have more to chat about. I can't thank you enough for being here today, sharing this space with me, being so vulnerable and raw, sharing your story, doing what you love to do, your yoga, grief yoga, working with your amazing clients. I have to take one of your classes.
Yeah, absolutely. Come take a class. They're beautiful, if I do say so myself.
That is amazing. I can't thank you enough. And I certainly hope you will definitely consider coming back as my guest.
I would love to come back as your guest.
Yay, yay. I will make sure that I take a yoga class before I have you come on again so we can chat more about yoga and all the good things that it brings about. Again, thank you from the bottom of my heart, sharing the story of you, sharing your journey in such a way that it inspires others, because certainly you have inspired others. And that's what stories is all about.
Thank you.
Hey, you're so welcome. Hey, everyone. I want to thank you so much for being here today. Grief is a very deep and personal thing for anybody to go through. We've all been through it at some point in our lives. And know that out of grief comes such amazing things in the world, to share what you are passionate about, but more importantly, to share that with others that makes a difference in their lives. I am so overwhelmed to have Paige in this space today. Know that if you have a story to tell, I would love to hear from you. My name is Janice, and I am the host of Stories That Inspires Us. Thank you all so much for being here today. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.